Why is it that some people are able to be hypnotized so easily and others struggle? And why is it that sometimes memories are close to the surface and easy to remember, while other memories stay buried deep within our subconscious and unconscious minds? My guest this week is a clinical counselor and hypnotherapist, and her name is Anjali Nagda. She will help us to understand these things, and we will get new insights and understandings. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hopenning 2.0, the place where hope is happening. I am Fran, and I am up in northern Alberta, Canada. And on this snowy January day, I welcome my guest, Anjali Nagda. And Anjali just returned from India, where she had been for a month or so, or more than that.
2 months.
And she is back in Alberta as well, in Edmonton. And it's a pleasure to have you here today, Anjali.
Likewise, happy to be here, friend.
Awesome. So I've been trying to connect with her for several months as she's been on her wonderful vacation. Anjali comes to us with a wealth of experience. She's a registered clinical hypnotherapist, and she's been working in clinical psychology as well. And she advocates for the powerful potential of utilizing the subconscious mind. So she's a registered clinical hypnotherapist and a registered clinical counselor. And as well, she offers services in many different types of modalities. And Anjali, we will get into that later. One of the, extremely important things in a counselor's life is being able to bill healthcare providers rather than the client themselves. And you have that ability too. So I'm really happy for you because as a hypnotherapist, I know what it's like to not be able to do that. So awesome. I welcome you and I'm grateful that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. And my aim here, as a result of our conversation, is to be able to share my experiences, my observations, and share whatever I have with you for the viewers. I think it is an incredible learning experience to be able to share ideas and experiences. And that's what truly builds us as human beings, also. So I'm really grateful to be here.
Right. And we're all about hope, bringing hope to people. And there are just so many ways of offering hope to people. And Anjali, what you do with your job, because I share your passion for that, the amazing things that we have seen in our clients over the years and how they come to us with a certain challenge and are able to work through that just with the time and attention and the willingness to do so. So I thank you because, we talked about this a little earlier that you're young, right? And you've got a whole career ahead of you. So how do you become a clinical hypnotherapist who's trained in how you are? Like, what was your journey to get here? And why, as a young person, would you want that? Why didn't you go into corporate or stay in an area where you don't have to think about other people's problems? So what got you on this journey to where you are right now?
I think the field of mental health, the field of hypnotherapy, I think these chose me than I chose them, to be really honest. I think as a child in school, I was definitely identified as a troublemaker with conduct concerns. I know it doesn't seem that way now, but I can vouch for myself to be a naughty kid growing up. And I think because I did all of my schooling in convent education, we had sisters and nuns around us. And through one of those experiences that I felt were challenging as a little kid in school to go through, I remember one of my sisters from school sitting me down, talking me through the big emotions that I was experiencing in the small size body that I had back then. And the way that her conversation and her empathy was able to transition me from feeling really bad about myself to showing me that there was hope for a person like me made me realize that that is something that I would have liked to pass on. Because I thought to myself that, okay, if I am going through this, I'm sure there are people who are experiencing this, if not worse things. And the ability to guide somebody to a more balanced life is something that, again, in a lot of ways would be for a chosen few like you and I. And, that is just something that I wanted to cultivate more than, just feeling it and wanting to pass it on, but to also train myself in something that can give me the tools that I need to support individuals to a more balanced state of life, balanced state of mind, balanced state of emotions. So that got me interested in doing my bachelor's in psychology. I did actually joint majors in psychology, journalism, and English literature, which is something that I credit to because it gave me the command of the language that I needed, again, to help me propel my growth in hypnotherapy. But shortly after doing my bachelor's, I was very motivated to move to Canada. Okay. And because I needed a 4-year bachelor's degree before I moved to Canada, I decided to take a year off where I would just relax a little bit, decompress myself because I outperformed myself during my bachelor's. I decided to do the hypnotherapy program that was offered in one of the cities in India. So the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of India is offering a year-long diploma in clinical and applied hypnotherapy. So I thought to myself that, okay, I'll probably sign up for this program. It's probably not very intensive, probably not very rigorous, and it'll give me the time off that I needed. And so I switched cities and I moved to Gujarat, which is actually my native place, where I've never lived, unfortunately, where I had never lived, unfortunately. And I just looked at it as an opportunity to connect back to my roots and take the year off that I really needed. And that year off actually gave me my lost passion. Studying hypnotherapy and learning about it definitely gave me a lot of insight as to how something that is very undervalued as a discipline can be used to give clients a cutting edge in the kind of results that they need in terms of their mental health. So I did my year-long program in hypnotherapy. And after that, I did my master's in clinical psychology. So even after doing my year-long diploma in hypnotherapy, I wasn't sure if that was the right pitch for me. But definitely after doing my master's in clinical psychology, I realized that hypnotherapy had more potential. Okay, I'm so scared to say this out loud, but that was my personal experience. And I felt like hypnotherapy had more to offer and lesser people offering it. And so I chose to sort of go along with hypnotherapy and, and then moved here and have been trying to set base here ever since.
I love that story. You had conduct disorder when you were a kid, like, because, that's such a path. Like, I teach part-time for the University of Alberta, and I teach young teachers how to teach, right? And often the teachers that come into our program had troubles learning, right? They struggled when they were children. And so it created it within them a real desire to help other children so that they don't have to go through the struggles they did. And I see that in your path as well. You also mentioned how you took the hypnotherapy first, and then you took your master's in psychology, and you realized how you could combine them both because hypnotherapy had so much body to it, so much more that the client could actually use as well. So your background is from India, and you live now in Northern Canada. And you've worked in clinics here in Canada since the time that you immigrated. What do you notice is different about hypnotherapy in general, how it's accepted, how people in India accept it as compared to people in North America or more specifically Canada?
There are going to be a few layers as we break down your question. And, if I'm looking down, I'm not looking down on my crotch, I'm looking down on my notebook because I've made some pointers and I would love to be factually more sound for the viewers, right? So I think when it comes to acceptance of hypnotherapy, I think the acceptance of hypnotherapy would be more here in Canada than it would be in India, solely on the basis of the terminology of it. Okay. When it comes to explaining what hypnotherapy is in India, using meditation as one of the terms is something that allows the clients to understand it from the context of it. Okay, contextually, individuals in India are more aligned to understanding what meditation is. So, using the term guided meditation allows them to understand and be more open to the concept of hypnotherapy. But when it comes to working with the population here, I've seen that individuals here do their fair share of research before they come to me. Okay, which definitely makes it a little bit easier because I have to start from level 2 when it comes to breaking down the concept and making them understand what the scope of this is going to be, because going over the misconceptions and the scope of hypnotherapy is a standard that I do in all of my sessions. So let's say if you were to come to me for a hypnotherapy session, I'm going to ask you what you know or don't know about hypnotherapy. And I will do like a standard 5 to 7 minute orientation about what hypnotherapy is. So essentially drawing the iceberg and understanding the conscious mind and touching upon it very briefly, just so that the client understands what they're going into. Okay. But when it comes to the practice of hypnotherapy, when it comes about implementing the inductions or, going into your guided visualizations, the suggestibility levels are very different when it comes to comparing it between India and Canada. Okay. So because faith and authority in India is higher, okay, the hypnotic suggestibility of individuals of succumbing themselves, okay, surrendering themselves to what is being spoken is more as compared to here in the West, here in Canada, when the analytic brain is at work. Okay, so around, let's say, when it comes to working with individuals in Eastern cultures, their suggestibility levels are 20 to 30% higher, right? Because the process of, let's say, waking up in the morning, worshiping your idol, praying, those are things that are more common in the Indian culture than it is here, right? So they slip into that state of trance more easily. They are able to access deeper states of trance than a lot of individuals here do. Of course, individual differences exist and they are always going to exist. And what I'm saying is not absolute in its nature. But the 20 to 30% higher hypnotizability is a study that was conducted by Raz et al. In 2007, which mentions that there is a difference in suggestibility levels. So hence, when it comes to the kind of progress that I'm able to see when I was working with clients as a hypnotherapist in India was slightly faster, okay, than while working with clients here. But within the scope of my experience, the clients here would take up their homework more seriously of practicing with those session recordings than they would, unfortunately, in India.
Within the culture is the meditation and the quieting and the calming, and it's within the culture. Whereas I find in Canada, anyway, there's certain pockets of people that have a strong faith, a strong type of spirituality, a connectedness to, you called it surrender, and connectedness is a word that I often use, even though the word surrender is a strong word. And even within a 12-step program, in order to fully embrace a 12-step program, you have to surrender. You have to. And I think we're not there yet as a culture. Like, we're really not. We still think in general that by our own working hard or just doing things differently, that we can create the environment for us that we're going to be happy, right? If I just work out more, or if I make more money, or if I marry the right woman or the right husband, or have the 2.3 children, or live in the right area of the city, or drive the right car, then I'll be happy. I think our culture is, because it's a younger culture in general, we haven't had the deep roots in thousands and thousands of years that you have had in India, right? So I love that, how you've actually got statistics about the suggestibility. You use the word induction. What does induction mean?
So induction is just, in a way, introduction of the client into a state of trance, guiding them from their conscious waking state, and transitioning that into taking them to their subconscious state of mind. So that subconscious state of mind would, again, not be a very magical, mysterious state of mind. It's just being in that state of mind where the body is more relaxed, the mind is more relaxed, and we're in a sleep-like state. So not as awake as you and I are right now, not as alert as we are right now, but definitely not as asleep, that if I were to go off to sleep full on, and if you were to have a conversation right next to me, and I wouldn't know what you're talking about. So being in that just in between kind of state where I'm more open to what is being said around me, and I'm not resisting it a lot with my critical filter, which is definitely playing a protective mechanism while I'm awake and I'm around, but it's just all a little loosened up so that I could be more open to what's being said to me for my growth, for my benefit, from a trained hypnotherapist.
Right, exactly. And I suppose you and I have to do it too. There's always will I be a chicken? Will I act like a chicken? I don't know. Like, for whatever reason, so many people have this belief that I'm going to have control over their mind, and they will walk out on the street and act like a chicken. Right? And like, what do you tell your clients in that 5 to 7 minute explanation of hypnotherapy that might help to alleviate that kind of worry?
For sure. And I think having that little bit of an orientation with my clients is it definitely takes away all of these resistances which may sort of hinder while we're trying to perform the induction and the guided visualization. So for me, it is not restricted to drawing the diagram and telling them about what the conscious mind is, but I give them live examples. So for example, I think it'll just be easier for me to do a quick sketch if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, it'll just make it more alive, and it'll give my future clients, probably who are going to come after looking at this podcast, they'll probably know what I do in my sessions a little bit more. So if this is a funny looking iceberg, okay, and if this is the tip of the iceberg, which is about 5 to 7% of the total mind, then that is the conscious mind. Okay, so the conscious mind is a part of the mind that is alert, awake, aware. It is critical, it is analytical in nature. All of our 5 senses put together keeps the conscious mind active. So when you're active, when you're awake, your conscious mind is active. When you're asleep, your conscious mind is not as active. So you see, I didn't use the word inactive because while you're sleeping, I could very gently tap you on the shoulder and try to wake you up. Doesn't mean that all your senses are off the radar. They're still there, but they're just not as active as they are. They're not as heightened as they are for you right now. Correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Then comes the second chunk of the mind, which is about 70 to 75% of the mind. And that is known as the subconscious mind. So until here, this is the subconscious mind. Okay. The subconscious mind, interestingly, is also known as an information reservoir. It has a lot of information that we need for our day-to-day use. So let me ask you a question, Fran. It's about 1:40 in the afternoon. Have you already had lunch today?
No.
Okay. Did you have breakfast though? Most
Yes,
important meal of the day.
I sure
Good.
did.
I'm glad you did. So what did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had oatmeal and yogurt and banana, and I had a coffee, which I continue to drink.
That is a very good breakfast spread. I hope you're going to invite me sometime soon for that.
Absolutely.
So your conscious mind is what allowed you to, listen to my question. Okay, because you're awake right now and you were able to hear everything that I said. And according to the model of the mind, not to be confused with the model of the brain, but according to the model of the mind, the subconscious mind is what helped you retrieve the answer to my question. All right. But there is, between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, a critical filter. All right. So this critical filter plays a very, very protective mechanism for the mind. So let us take another example. So you were very, very cooperative with me when I asked you what you had for breakfast. But let's see if you'd be comfortable talking to me about this. Do you think you would feel comfortable if I asked you for your social security number? Or let's say your credit card PIN number or your credit card details, do you think you'd feel comfortable sharing the answer to that question with me right here on
No,
the podcast?
no,
No.
thank you.
Perfect. And you know what? I've actually had to modify this question over the course of my practice here, because there was this one time when I asked one of my clients that, would you feel comfortable sharing your social security number with me? And they just blurted it out. And I was like, hey, I didn't hear anything that you said. If something happens to you, I'm not responsible for it. And I was like, okay,
Wow.
maybe I need to modify this question as I move along.
Right, right.
So the critical filter is what made you feel, hey, Anjali doesn't need to know about my social security number. She doesn't need to know, my sensitive banking details, right? And it helped you say no to me, right? It's playing a protective role. So the critical filter and the conscious mind are very closely tied to each other. So when you're awake and active, the critical filter is also very, very active. But when you are in a sleep-like state, when your conscious mind is not very active, the critical filter is not very active either. So when we guide a client into a state of hypnosis, our aim is to bypass the conscious mind and the critical filter. And our aim is to go and access the subconscious mind, where we either give them direct suggestions of, switching from maladaptive to more adaptive behaviors, or we do a little bit of problem solving within the space of the subconscious and the unconscious mind. Okay. However, while we are in the state of the subconscious mind, and let's say we're doing a guided visualization of a garden, and I ask you to visualize all the beautiful flowers around you, and I encourage you to go ahead and pluck the most beautiful flower that you see and get a good smell of it. Okay. And for personal reasons, you may believe that when I see a beautiful flower in the garden, I don't necessarily have to pluck that flower. Okay, I don't need to pluck it. I can just see it, because as kids, we've all seen boards which say, do not pluck the flowers. Okay, and if that is something that you've internalized and that is something that you're not very comfortable with, you have by all means the power to ignore what I am saying. So you could be in a deepest level of trance, and I could tell you that please pluck the rose that you see in front of you. But if your ethics or if your principles or if just your personal choice feels otherwise, you can choose to exercise that right. You know why? It's because you're constantly listening to and processing everything that I'm saying. So the fact that you're in a garden around a lot of flowers, you're able to mentally take yourself in that place is because you are allowing yourself to imagine something like that, imagining a garden instead of a circus. Okay, so while you have the personal choice of imagining something that you like, you also have your personal right of exercising something that you'd like. Now, let's say if I'm being a little too pushy about it, I'm like, no, you have to plug the phone, and you're finding it hard to ignore what I am saying. Again, in an actual setup, highly unlikely that I would do something like that. But just hypothetically, if this is something that's happening, you can immediately open your eyes and ask me to back off, or tell me that this is not something that you're comfortable doing, because we are practicing hypnotherapy, which is a therapeutic use of what hypnotherapy is. There is no way that you are surrendering yourself to the practitioner. You are very much responsible in the state of hypnosis, as you would be in an waking state. So we use this kind of therapy just to suggest ideas to you that is going to help you achieve your personal goals, that is going to help you achieve the therapeutic goals that we mutually set for ourselves. So these are just some of the ways that I use the diagram, and I use some of these examples so that I can, remove any of the misconceptions or any fears. And these are all legitimate concerns that individuals have. If I wasn't educated about hypnotherapy, I would have had these doubts and these questions too. And sometimes these, when translated into fears, sort of get in the way of us entering the state of trance in the first place. Right? And following this bit of an introduction, I guide my clients into a state of induction. We do a little bit of muscular relaxation just to begin with, because I want my clients to dip their toes, test the waters to see how comfortable they feel. So my intake session with my clients go on for a lengthy 90 minutes. And we test the waters first. I make sure that they do feel comfortable, that they have the right of choice when they are in a state of trance. And from there, we take things off and we start achieving the goal. So even though this process makes it a little lengthier for me and my practice, I've seen that it often eradicates all the fears that I need to with my clients, and my clients feel more confident going in and doing in some deeper work, so to speak. into a state of hypnosis. Okay, so the last part is about 10 to 15% of the mind, which is known as the unconscious mind.
The
The
unconscious.
the unconscious mind is the part of the mind that has memories from the time that we were conceived in the womb until the present moment and everything that happened in between. And also for the clients who do believe in past life, all of that information is also stored in here. Okay. Now, of course, you wouldn't remember what you wore or what kind of celebrations you did on your second, third, or fourth birthday. But it's not that the information is deleted. It's not that it's gone. It's just probably concised into really, really small particles of information, and it's stored in your unconscious mind. And with the help of hypnotherapy, we can access that information or those memories if it is therapeutically relevant, of course, not to joyride into the unconscious mind and explore things. But of course, when attached with the right kind of purpose, exploring the unconscious mind is also very imperative, because the unconscious mind is also where your fears, your phobias, your traumas, all of that is stored in the unconscious mind. So, for example, if let's say an individual is phobic of heights, okay, and this is where the fear resides.
Yeah.
And in your conscious waking state, you try to tell somebody who has phobia of heights, and you try to tell them, hey, it's okay, you're going to be fine, it's okay. And the person tries rationalizing with their fear that, okay, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to be fine. But all of that rationalization is happening in the conscious mind, and the fear is all the way here. You see the gap, you see the distance between the two. So often when it comes to working with phobias or psychological traumas, it's best to come down here at the bottom of the mind and work it through, instead of rationalizing all the way to the top. I'm not saying that, psychology, counseling, all of these things, they help us with symptom management and symptom control. And they also help us sort of break down the trauma and, the trauma responses. But a lot of the times when I've worked with clients who have phobic responses, who have trauma responses to a lot of the symptoms around them, it has given me faster results to use, let's say, regression therapy and take my client to the inception of their fear, of course, with the right amount of pre-sessions, the right amount of post-sessions, the right amount of discussions, to go back to the root of the cause and, sort of work it through from there. So the unconscious mind is very permeable between the conscious and the subconscious. So right here. So the conscious and the unconscious mind is very permeable. So the line that you see here is not as rigid as it is for the conscious and the subconscious mind. So within a state of trance, we can easily go in and out of these states and just use the power of the beautiful mind that we all have and try to give it the right direction for our growth.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked. I'm glad I asked that, because that's where the pain lives, right? The unconscious mind, I call it the subconscious mind in my practice, is where the pain lives, where it was born, where the pain was born, and it percolates up into these fears on the top. So let's say I came to you, Anjali, and I'm ready to try hypnotherapy, and I have social anxiety. That's my thing. I am afraid of going in where there's more than 3 people. I just don't like it. I'm an introvert, but I think there's more than that. It's not just because I'm an introvert. There's just this, I just don't like it. I just get shaking and I get sweaty and my palms get sweaty and I can't talk. My tongue feels like it's full of, in my mouth, and my throat starts to close in, and my heart starts pumping. And I just feel like when I'm in a social situation, I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack or a panic attack or break down and cry. So I'm sure that you've seen this before in your practice. I have. I know I have. Take me through the session. So you've already explained to me the iceberg of the mind. So with my problem, which is social anxiety, how would you address that?
Perfect. So I think following the case history and understanding from the iceberg what hypnotherapy is and what the scope of it is going to do, one of the things that is most imperative when I'm working with clients who experience a lot of anxiety is understanding the difference between fear and anxiety. So I'm going to start by asking you, what do you think is the difference between fear and anxiety?
Gosh, that's a good one. Fear might be like for anxiety. I think I'm thinking forwards. I think this is what I think is going to happen. I don't want to go there because I think that this is going to happen. Whereas fear, it's rational. There's a wolf outside, and I am not going outside because I can see that wolf, and he's there on my doorstep. That would be my definition.
You're absolutely right. Fear is rooted in the here and the now. Fear is real, it is tangible, or it is definitely present, not just for you, but also for the people around you to be able to see it in the same way. And anxiety is something that is more anticipatory. That if there was a snake in this room, God forbid, if there was a snake in this room where I am, I would feel so scared that just thinking about it triggers my fear response, right? And understanding that gives the clients a lot of the perspective. It's like creating a shift in paradigm, that, okay, this is something that I am thinking about. Okay. So that means that this could be in my control, that I could choose to think about it, or I could use the tools that are available to shift my perspective around it. Okay. The second thing that I definitely go over with my clients who are working through anxiety is, do you think your anxiety in any way is helping you? Right? A lot of the times we are so caught on to the symptoms of what we are experiencing, the physical symptoms or the mental system symptoms, or just in that moment, the distress that we go through, that we often forget that these symptoms are actually playing a protective mechanism. In that moment, because your mind is thinking of things that could happen, and of course, the possibilities are endless, there comes a point where your mind needs to draw a line. Okay, that your thoughts don't get so debilitating or so daunting that it becomes difficult for you to stay in the present. It creates a sense of distraction. With the help of these physiological symptoms, what are they doing? It's a distraction to shift your focus from your thoughts to the physical experiences that you go through. It's helping you stay more grounded. Your anxiety, in a way, is also playing a protective mechanism, not saying that it's the best way to do it. Okay, there are other ways that the mind could protect us, but it's trying to do the best that it can given the situation. Would you rather sit and keep thinking, or would you rather shift your focus to the physical experiences that you're going through and try to calm yourself on that front? So instead of fighting the anxiety, if we try to break it down and see what the anxiety is, what it's trying to do in that moment is to protect us in a certain specific way. Okay. When we try to look at it through that lens, it becomes easier to be present with the anxiousness. Okay. And also to not try to personalize it as much. I often tell my clients that when we are going through some of these experiences, let's say big emotions like anger or experiences such as anxiety, instead of saying I am angry or I am feeling anxious, we could also shift our perspective and say there is anger.
Oh, yes.
There is anxiety, right? We don't have to identify with the emotion or with the feeling. Once we create a bit of a gap between us and our experiences, it gives us that buffer to get an edge over managing it also. So before sort of trying to dig into, let's take away the anxiety, let's, push it off, let's not, let it not be a part of your existence. Let's try to understand what its role is in your life. Okay, so that is one part of the discussion that I do with my clients, and creating that shift in their mindset is going to be the most important thing to then work around it. And then once we establish that, again, with individual clients, length of discussion also matters because I try to make it as relevant to their life as compared to keeping it more generic. Then we try to get into a sense of symptom control. Instead of going to the root cause of it, taking them all the way back with age regression, probably very overwhelming because you already have a client who's very anxious. Okay. The thought of going back to the root cause and, being face to face with the inception of your fear is also going to be very, very daunting. So we try to do some symptom control by creating an anchor, a physical anchor, or let's say a simple anchor, which brings you back to the present moment. For example, we try to go into a state of trance, okay, and try to do simple classical conditioning, so to speak, that every time I tap my fingers, I bring myself back into the here and the now. The intention of tapping my fingers, again, is going to be associated with, Anjali had told me that whenever I tap, I'm going to feel fine. There is a positive intention to it. You know what that is doing? That is shifting your train of thought from, oh my God, this is going to happen, or you're being caught up in the cobwebs of what ifs. I'm shifting my mindset to doing something that may help me out. And the anchor just does that. How is tapping or, clenching your fist going to, take your anxiety away? No, it's not. But it's just doing some sense of a thought reconstruction that when I do whatever physical action, then I am going to feel calmer. And it's more of a mental shift than it is a physical shift. So using different types of anchoring or using Stein's clenched fist technique, or using some of these methods that are so commonly available in hypnotherapy, just to create that shift in the client's mind becomes very important. Because this is an anxious client, they're probably going to take a little bit longer to trust me and the process that I'm introducing to them, because they've kept fear very closely around them. So when we do these anchoring methods, that helps them build a little bit of confidence in hypnotherapy, in the practitioner themselves. So that's, step 2. After the shift in paradigm of the mind, then we do a hypnotherapy session around creating an anchor. And when the client sees success with it and they feel confident that, okay, I'm willing to do regression therapy, okay, to, get this out from the roots of my life, they also know that in that state of coming face to face with their fears where it all started, they also have a tool to help them in that state of hypnosis also. For example, if the client is being regressed 20 years back when they first conceived the fear, okay,
right,
they can use the tool of the anchor or the tapping in the session as well, right? So they know that they have something to lean on.
Right.
I can't leave my client at the risk of being re-traumatized, right? So we build certain tools, we build certain techniques, we build certain mechanisms, and if only the client feels comfortable about regression therapy, we go all the way back and we try to restructure that entire event for them, right? So then we do regression therapy, we reaffirm the anchor, we re-strengthen the anchor, and then we try to sort of change the narrative that was fed to the mind at the time that the fear was conceived.
Right.
And then we bring the client back, and then, we do a few follow-ups, and that's how, I would work with the client who is going through social anxiety.
So, in your practice, what have you found to be a common thread to cause social anxiety? Like what may have happened in my childhood to cause me to be anxious in a social situation now at my age, when I'm like, I should have no problem at all. I've had a long life, and I've done tons of different stuff, and I've had all kinds of self-help books, and I've been to psychologists. What often is a common thread that you have found in your work that may have caused social anxiety at this point, which I'm sure was slowly building in the client?
So there's definitely vicarious learning that I have seen in individuals, because often a primary caregiver or a parent has dealt with social situations, with the garb of putting a strong front but being anxious on the inside. And I think I'm just going to go back to my diagram here, because I think most of the concepts that I've understood in hypnotherapy is built because of this iceberg right here. Okay, so the critical filter that I talked to you about, which plays a protective mechanism in the mind, the critical filter inherently does not exist for the first 7 to 8 years of our lives. Okay, The critical filter does not exist. What that means is there's a conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind. For the first 8 years of your life, when you're in your alert and waking state, whatever you see around yourself, you are allowing all of that information to go in. And you are absorbing all of that information like a sponge, just taking it all in. Okay. And around the age of 7 to 8, when the critical filter does come in, with whatever information you've collected over the first 8 years of your life, you piece them together. And again, it's a very subconscious process. So I hope, nobody's thinking about, I don't remember piecing all of that information together. No, it's a very continuing process that happens in the background. A lot of that information is pieced together to the best of the capacity of the individual. And that is the worldview that they develop for themselves, right? And this is something that I tell all of my clients, especially clients who are around kids who are very young, because we have to be very careful about the kind of information that we're sharing with the kids around. Okay. So for the most part, I've met individuals who are working their way through anxiety to have conceived these coping mechanisms. Okay. That's how I look at it, from a very young age. And it just gets more and more defined. It just gets more and more solidified each year, right? Until it is, until you take it back, you go a few spaces back, and instead of just trying to work on the symptom management part of it, every time I've gone back, it's either been I've seen my mom being anxious, I've seen my dad being anxious, and I just thought that's how you deal with things, or that's how you deal with fears. And that's been my observation, but I'd be very curious to know what your observation has been.
It's very similar. And where they started their life out super brave, right? 0 to 4-year-old, they're not afraid of anything, really. 0 to 3-year-old, even. The world is their oyster. They're running onto the street. It's like, oh, that's disgusting. You must put that down. And so they develop a repertoire of what's on the good side and what's on the not good side. And so just these little collections of events in their life, whether it was parents saying, oh, I just have such a hard time walking into a room of strangers. Right? I have such a hard time with that. It could be the dad, could be the mom, could be their loving auntie. It could be the teacher, whoever. I just have such a hard time with that. And the child loves this person, and they're watching and they're sponging, right? They're collecting all those little moments, like you said, into their sponge of it's not safe to cross the street. It's not safe to get in front of a car. If you get into a car accident or something like that, that even solidifies that a little bit more until this human's life becomes solidly believing. It's no longer a sponge. The sponge is not pliable anymore. It's one great big ball of a belief, right? That is, I am anxious. I cannot go into a situation where there's more than 3 people. So now I'm turning down events. I am turning down occasions to get together with people. I am turning down job offers. I'm turning down. There's so many things that become so limiting in your life, which has nothing to do with you as an adult. It all has to do with you collecting events and emotions, mostly from other people, when you were a child. So what you said is, in my history too, it's spot on. Whether the parents said, you must not ever go swimming here. Okay, I won't. And now suddenly, after a number of years, now they're afraid to go in the water, or those types of things, like the travel is dangerous, or that airplanes are dangerous, or that, oh, the list is endless, right? That life is scary, that we must be careful all the time, that there's just so many ways that we can be hurt, and that our loved ones can be hurt. And then we begin to live in a state of it, transforms into these fears, like the fears that are just debilitating. And I think that what both of us do in our work is so paramount. It's so paramount is, yes, we can talk on a couch. I call it couch therapy for 5 years or more, and never address the root of the problem or get familiar with us, trust us. And then once we have a trust relationship, let's find out where this root is so that we can start healing that small child, start healing the little one,
I
right?
agree. Yeah. And I think just one other contribution to what you said, just to add to it, you know, when when the primary caregivers around us while we're growing up, the use of should statements, the
Mm.
use of must statements, okay, has been very beautifully woven into cognitive behavior therapy. It's actually known as a cognitive distortion, your should statements. And the must statements are also known as the masturbatory thoughts. It's so funny. Every time I say it, I
I
have a
know, me
giggle.
too. I just thought of that.
And this is a thinking error. This is a cognitive distortion because, and this is something a client told me. And she said, should statements are, are very closely linked with guilt. You
Mm.
should do this. Oh my God, I didn't. I feel so guilty about it, right? It's just drawing you to one end of the spectrum. So every time I see should statements within a client's cognition, whenever I'm conversing with them, and of course, the mind is always looking for cognitive distortions while working with a client to see how we can make their thoughts feel more balanced. The should statements and black and white thinking is something that goes parallel when working with clients and when identifying the client's thought patterns. And it becomes so challenging because a lot of the clients lead their lives, and especially in India, they lead their lives thinking that I have to do this.
Mm.
I have to put up with this family member who is constantly, weighing me down or, taking shots at me or making me feel bad about myself. But I have to stay close to them or I have to maintain my relationship with them because then when I ask them because, and then they don't have an answer to that. And that's when I think that in a lot of ways, even though the culture here in the West is more individualistic, right? In a lot of ways, boundary setting is something that is done very, very beautifully here. You don't have to do anything. You can do the things that you want to do. By and large, again, I'm not trying to make an absolute statement out of this, but in a lot of ways, I think the way people in the West use their boundaries and implement that around themselves, I think gives them a lot of accountability also, gives them the tools to openly communicate with other individuals, which is not something that happens in India. One of the reasons being that there's a lot of social I think I've written a word and I want to use that.
Is it like an obligation?
It is the approval. There,
Okay.
the social approval is so high in India that it deters people from having certain important conversations or drawing certain important boundaries because they just feel like they have to do certain things. And that is something that I absolutely appreciate about the West. But again, overdoing it in the West also leads for a lot of individuals here to experience hyper individualism. This also leads to a lot of social isolation. So I think the aim is to find the right balance of drawing the essential boundaries that need to be drawn for a person's mental health, and in smaller ways, in smaller social ways, also letting go of certain things that may not be that big of a deal sometimes. And where does that line fall? And that line could be at a different level for you and could be at a different level for me. And I think the game of life is just finding where I stand and trying to even it out with where you are so that we can foster social relationships also.
Right. Yeah. I love that. So we are getting close to the end of our time here. What words of wisdom or tips like that? That is awesome. I like that. I've not seen that before, right? So that's one tip. But what words of wisdom or different types of advice would you give to people that are seeking hope maybe and healing and feel that they're not living up to their true potential, what would you tell them?
I've written something down.
Oh,
So I think one of the most important message that I would like to share with our lovely viewers is, let's not undervalue the potential of mindfulness, the ability to stay in the present moment, because we touched upon anxiety, which are a lot of future driven thoughts. And let's say if you and I were to be quiet for 1 full minute, okay, on an average, a human being would have about 6 to 7 branches of thoughts, okay, within the frame of being quiet and being silent for 1 minute. And those thoughts are, of course, either thoughts of the past or thoughts of the future. But what mindfulness teaches us is to sort of break through that barrier and find that space of being present in the present moment. Okay, it could be about focusing on something objective that is outside of you, or it could be about focusing on your breath, or finding something to focus on that can ground you to the present moment. And I would love, and I always do, if my clients who've done any sessions with me would definitely be able to quote me on this, but I always quote Kung Fu Panda because I think it just made so much sense when I watched the movie. And I think Master Shifu, he said, yesterday was mystery. No, yesterday was history, tomorrow is mystery, but today is a gift, and that's why we call it the present.
oh yeah.
And the ability of being in the present moment is having a sense of absolute control, okay? Because technically, if you think about it, the present moment is all the control that you have and all the control that you can exert also, right? And we have the potential to be in the present moment because it gives us a lot of perspective. I don't have to live in the future in my mind because I don't know how much of that future do I really have. Unfortunately, that's such a deep, dark way of looking at it. But the present moment is truly what we all have control over. So finding a few moments in the day where we can practice mindfulness. I encourage my clients to do a lot of breathing awareness. Probably I tell them at least 1 minute of breathing awareness in a day, so that you know that you can come back to the present moment, you can be in the present moment, which will give you that buffer, which will give you that space, which will give you that control, that in this moment, this is all that I can do to take control or to manage whatever's happened or whatever might happen, and to be with ourselves for that moment and to really connect with ourselves. So breathing awareness, mindfulness, finding at least a minute in the day, if not definitely more, but at least a minute in the day to connect with ourselves, and that'll give us a peek into the reservoir of potential that we all have. And that's not, at least that's not something that I'm able to do on a schedule, but there are moments in the day when I'm like, okay, I need to calm myself down. And I would just sit with myself and I would, hold my chest and my stomach and I would just breathe. And that is something that I definitely want to be more regular about. And talking about it is just reaffirming my subconscious mind as well, that I have to be more in the present.
Yeah, that's so true, right? Because, like you said, yesterday was history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a present, and it's a gift, and it's all we know. All I know right now is this very moment. And it's such a pleasure to share this moment with you. So, what is your last message of hope?
I think that a lot of the mental health symptoms that we experience, there's definitely a silver lining to them because most of them are protective mechanisms. A lot of your psychosomatic concerns, your sometimes even chronic pain or migraines or even anxiety for that matter, if we try to look at the macro picture of the symptoms that we are experiencing, again, not always, not always, not always, but sometimes when we try to look at the macro picture, we often get a lot of answers as to the symptoms that we're experiencing is our body's way of telling us something. Are we open to hearing about it? And the fact that, people like you and I and all our other, practitioners are here to support us to, fill in that gap or fill in that missing link, to be open to, taking somebody's support as to filling the blanks, right? And life doesn't have to be a certain way. It can be the way you want to shape it. And there are people like us who are more than willing and more than happy to facilitate those journeys for individuals. And it gives most individuals that I've met from our mental health profession, like you said, there's a purpose attached to it. A lot of us are here because there's something that drove us to this point. So, you know, take us up and put our skills to test, and bring us your concerns and allow us to facilitate this journey for you, because what's on the other side is going to be very, very beautiful and fulfilling. So let's take that control back and ensure that we're all leading the lives that we want to live.
Oh, so true. So true. So Anjali, how can people get a hold of you? Where can we find you?
So like I said, I live in Edmonton, and I am working here at Red Leaf Wellness. And I'm more than happy to see walk-in clients. I work 4 days a week at Red Leaf Wellness. It's a beautiful clinic. It's a house turned into a clinic. It's very, very warm and cozy, and I have my most beautiful recliner there. So you're more than welcome to come see me at Red Leaf Wellness. And I've recently also joined this female-run company, Mind Recovery Therapy.
Okay.
And this is a virtual and in-person clinic based out of Manitoba. And I am working with Mind Recovery Therapy on a virtual basis. So I'm an associate therapist at a virtual level. So I am willing to see clients from all over Canada for hypnotherapy. And for clinical counseling, I am seeing clients from Alberta and British Columbia. So I've combined for a lot of my clients who want to use hypnotherapy, who want to experience hypnotherapy as part of their healing journey, and they want to use their benefits, they want to use the direct billing feature. I've combined my service offerings as clinical counseling hypnotherapy so that people can use my services to get direct billed and get best of both worlds, clinical counseling and clinical hypnotherapy.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a wonderful thing. I'm so happy for you. So I wish you all the best in 2025. And maybe sometime I will see you at Red Leaf Wellness in Edmonton, or
Yes.
at the other one, the Mind Recovery Therapy, which is the company run by women. So hooray for us. And so have a wonderful rest of your year, Anjali. At the beginning of 2025, I see wonderful things happening for you. So I thank you so much for being along with us. And I thank all of our guests for viewing us today. And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe. It makes a world of difference, and let others know about us as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me over, Fran. It was a beautiful discussion. I definitely had some jitters before we started, but I think once we got into it, it just felt so nice in your warm presence to share this conversation with you. And I am definitely going to promote this as much as I can, because we all need a little bit of hope each day to
Yes.
carry on with our lives. And I think you're doing an amazing job.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, we'll talk to you later, and thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.